I'm Matt at Nexus Baseball, and this is episode 46 of the Tommy John Epidemic. This series is a YouTube read of content from the book Plague of the Gods, an outsider's perspective on baseball's Tommy John Epidemic, which is available now on Amazon. I decided to put this content on YouTube to make the material as accessible as possible. This series examines the science behind the most superhuman action the human body can produce, accelerating a baseball up to 100 miles per hour. The alternative is to use long toss not as an arm strength development tool, but a tool to develop the ability of the pitcher to put backspin on the baseball. The approach is the same, playing catch from a short distance and then increasing distance a pace backwards each time. Spin rate is usually relative to velocity for an individual pitcher, and the better the velocity, the more they can bleed off velocity for spin rate by changing the grip level and release point. In this approach, the pitchers throw progressively harder on each throw, with ever greater backspin to ensure the most level flight of the baseball possible. In this manner, they are building the touch or grip level required at each throwing velocity to execute a laser beam-like four-seam fastball. They can then utilize the same touch and apply it to breaking pitches during bullpens, just with off-center grips, but the same relative grip level. In addition to the process and tools of training, it is important to look at training frequency. It should be re-emphasized that the pitching motion, when utilized using the correct muscle groups, is not an inherently damaging motion and should not be treated as such when training. Training frequency should recognize that the pitching motion is a muscular activity that uses muscles rather than ligaments to complete. As such, the same guidelines that inform modern muscular training should inform pitcher training frequency and the protocols. Athletes can train any muscle group several times a week while building muscular size, strength, or endurance, assuming the correct recovery methods are used, including proper nutrition and sleep. The key is finding the correct workload to achieve the desired goal for the individual, based on their unique level of recovery, to avoid overtraining. Overtraining would result in decreased muscular performance, and in the case of a finely balanced motion like pitching, potential injury, with additional muscles kicking in to pick up the slack. For most pitchers, however, they suffer from the exact opposite effect, undertraining. Even more dangerous than overtraining, undertraining occurs when the muscles are not developed to their individual capacities in terms of strength and endurance, particularly in relationship to the other muscles of the body. This form of improper training leaves the athlete vulnerable to injury by not preparing the muscles fully for the task to be completed, leaving them vulnerable to repeated stress injuries. As discussed, having the muscles used in the pitching motion undertrained in comparison to the larger support muscles creates an imbalance that favors their use instead of the smaller, correct muscle groups. Due to the impact of UCL injuries particularly, the response has been to treat pitchers like they are made of glass and reduce workloads by reducing training levels and implementing pitch counts. This has had the opposite effect as intended in preventing UCL damage. The reason again is that as the pitcher throws less, they're doing less work to strengthen the pitching muscles overall through the act of throwing, while at the same time using the additional time to focus on strength building in the form of generalized strength and conditioning programs. The result is a large strength imbalance between the already strong larger muscles of the body in comparison to the much weaker throwing muscles. Consider, for example, the standard program for the starting pitcher. In a 5-day period, or more given off days, rainouts, etc., a modern starter will throw approximately 100 pitches on their start and throw a 30-pitch bullpen for a total workload of about 130 competitive pitches. This is not including warm-up pitches, which are generally thrown more slowly and may constitute another 30 to 50 throws before both the bullpen and start, plus approximately that many on one of the off days. The strength and conditioning equivalent of this weekly program would be taking an athlete and having them lift weights for 3+ hours at peak capacity one day, for 45 minutes another, and then just doing light warm-up work the rest of the week. Any trainer that prescribed such a program would be negligent at best. Instead, standard protocols have trainers work with athletes from 2 to 6 days a week, with mostly equal workloads between days, with either a whole body or body part split approach to maximize the number of muscle groups individually targeted. The goal being to train progressive overload of the muscles by stimulating their development lightly, at first with fewer days and lighter loads, slowly ramping up the intensity until the athlete's full capabilities are reached. In baseball terms, if a pitcher is a starter, they need to develop the workload capacity to throw 100 or more pitches as if that is a normal day at the office. To do that, they need to throw considerably more rather than less. Instead, they're currently doing one incredibly demanding workout once a week. Although it might be counterintuitive that increasing workloads would keep pitchers safer and more able to recover, but has remembered that the body quickly adapts and can just as quickly lose that adaptation to whatever stresses are placed upon it. By doing a single massive primary activity, the body is so exhausted because it is outside of the daily routine stresses it experiences. With strength and conditioning clients that train 1 or 2 days a week and push themselves, they will frequently experience delayed onset muscle soreness for several days after a workout, only dissipating in time for the next workout. This creates a cycle of always having to ramp up and down their adaptation to resistance training. This is particularly true if they're not spot on with their recovery methods, including nutrition. Instead, athletes that train 4, 5, or 6 days a week with intensity and the correct recovery are rarely sore, so long as the routine has been tailored to slowly increase their work level. I would suggest this is even more important in the pitching realm, as the rotator cuff and serratus muscles used get little use from normal day-to-day activity, making their consistent training a priority. This situation is even worse with relief pitchers, many of whom only throw 2 innings a week. Not knowing when they will be called upon, they rarely do bullpens and instead will just do light throwing work in between appearances. In comparison to a strength and conditioning program, this would be akin to having an athlete go into the gym, warm up, give max effort on 1 or 2 sets, and then leave. They might, over time, be able to put up decent strength on that exercise, but they will never have the volume to develop muscular endurance, or muscular growth, or recovery capability. This, in conjunction with being able to do more exercises to hit different parts of the body, are the rationales for longer workouts. Without these components, the athlete is left vulnerable to injury, and again would be a program that would never be advised. What are the alternatives? A more appropriate approach would be to build up the capacity to throw at a higher level several times a week, limit the amount of warm-up work completed in between to allow for recovery, and spread out the workload. This will vary from individual to individual, as even with perfect training protocols, human beings will differ in their workload capacity. 2 athletes might be able to train 6 days a week, for example, but at different workloads to allow for recovery, with age and body type being a big factor in these differences. The process should be, with every athlete, to find the point at which recovery is not complete and either stay within that ceiling or try to raise it through a complete training program. Pitch tracking is a good tool for this, just like repetitions are for resistance training, but only from an individual perspective for that pitcher. One pitcher might be able to have a ceiling of 300 pitches in a 7-day period. Another might be capable of less than half of that to maintain their ability to recover. The challenge is to watch a pitcher's mechanics with a keen eye to determine when fatigue sets in before it becomes harmful. This can only be done in slow motion, as there are small individual tells that indicate when a pitcher is fatiguing and their form is breaking down. These tells occur when the pitcher attempts to bring other muscles into the process, thereby subtly altering their form. When these tells can be seen with the naked eye, they're usually already significant enough that they could be causing a lack of balance. One of my biggest complaints about the current coaching system is that the pitching coach is standing or sitting in the dugout watching their pitcher with the naked eye. No matter the coach's skill, the motion is simply too quick for the human eye to see, and nothing is observable outside of gross motor errors that would be, by that point, be already causing problems. It is simply nonsensical that in the 21st century, pitching coaches are not scrutinizing every pitch in real time using high-speed digital photography. Each pitch could be viewed from multiple angles and reviewed in slow motion before the next pitch is thrown. Everything from the biomechanics to the pitch action reviewed and annotated before the next pitch. The technology to do this is available on any high-end smartphone, and should be trivial for a major league stadium to implement in a closed-end system to prevent cheating. Additionally, this process should be available for the bullpens as well, for pre-game warm-up throws, as well as when relievers are warming up. Bullpen coaches should be equally as skilled as the pitching coach, but this is simply not the case. Usually the role of the bullpen coach is to coordinate usage and help the reliever get ready, as opposed to providing detailed feedback and analysis. The pitching coach works primarily with the starters, leaving the relievers with once a week or so check-ins and a much reduced focus. The bullpen coach should fill this role, having ideal pitch templates for each reliever that they can compare with each warm-up pitch to check for safety as well as efficiency. Relievers often come out of the bullpen after their warm-ups without their best stuff, only getting a visit from the pitching coach if they get hit around, and again, only using their eyeball perspective. Simply put, the system is archaic and needs a complete overhaul for the modern era. Join me for episode 47 next week. Remember, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Your support makes this work possible. Also, if you want to jump ahead, please consider picking up the book on Amazon from the link in the description below. See you next week.